Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my good buddies, Greg Sterling, Neil Polachek, and John Gerard. Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
How are you? Good. Doing great. Another big week in the world of AI. We're going to unpack a few things that we'll talk about today, and then we'll jump into it. Google announced that Google One had surpassed 150 million subscribers. A lot of that is driven by demand in AI, and we can talk a little bit about that. And also talks a little bit about what Google is doing in addition to AI outside of that. Ramp AI is an index that discovered that over a third of U.S. businesses are now paying for AI tools. So we'll talk about that. And we've got some notes from the field as well. John's got an interesting thought experiment that we'll dig into. And I had some really interesting experience with a tool called Deep Agent, which is by a company called Abacus, connecting with 5,000 APIs and creating agentic capabilities there. So let's start off with this Google story. Google One surpassed 150 million subscribers. Greg, you want to lead off with that one?
Yeah, Google One is a storage product that bundles a bunch of services.
I think I have a subscription and I don't even know it. I
Yeah.
just get a $99 invoice every couple months.
Yeah, it's a storage program like iCloud essentially. But what they've done is they bundled in whatever the sort of next tier up from free is with Gemini. So you get access to the better version of Gemini as a part of that, and that's driven a lot of these subscriptions apparently. So kind of it's a value add that caused people to sort of cross over the line and decide that this was worth spending $20 a month. So there's three plans: basic, premium, and AI premium. You get Gemini at the $20 a month plan, and you get 2 terabytes of storage. What it shows fundamentally is that there's demand for Gemini, and people are subscribing to get access to better features, earlier upgrades, and so on and so forth. Google's goal is to get to 500 million Gemini users by the end of the year, and they claim 300.
Paid?
No, not paid, but just in general. And they claim 350 million, I believe, was one of the Google Remedies trial statements somebody made that they now had 350 million global users, but they're pushing it in every conceivable way. And how user is defined is unclear. What's a user?
What constitutes a use of Gemini as well, I think is an open question on that one.
I mean, if I do a search
right
in Google's AI mode, is that a Gemini user?
Just shows up.
What we talked about in this release was that these are paid subscribers, right?
Yeah, these are subscribers. These are people who want it, that consciously are making a decision to pay for it.
The idea here is that they're trying to diversify their advertising income, right? They realize what's happening to Google search and the ad revenue that's happening there. And so they're looking to diversify their revenue because it's a defensive play against the possible erosion that might happen.
That's been something they've been trying to do for a very long time. And
yes,
the biggest problem, it's a huge business that Google won at 150 million times X dollars a month. But
20.
the problem is that their ad business is a huge business.
It's a huger business.
So even if they get everybody, even if they get the whole world on Google One, I don't know that they would be able to kind of get close to their ad revenue side. I mean, it's a worthwhile thing. I think the more interesting thing, frankly, from my perspective. So Google One is the equivalent that all the cloud service providers have, which is extra storage. Put all your photos online, unlimited email, just the usual package of extending the services that the cloud provides. And what's really interesting to me is that AI is becoming woven so deeply into that very standard kind of old set of services, right? So, I mean, this is a set of services that has been around since the early call it email wars started. Are you going to have a Hotmail? Are you going to have a Gmail account? Start uploading your photos, Apple and their iCloud stuff. And now AI is becoming a central offering in that, quite old school thing. That's very mainstream. And it's even more indication of how quickly AI has become mainstream.
And isn't it helpful to have that as part of your storage so it can look at stuff and understand you and all that stuff
and feed it to Google for ad targeting?
Right.
Yeah. I think that's certainly the positioning. Some of this stuff is a little dubious. There's a lot of times when I've taken Gemini up on the offer to, hey, try out a Gemini prompt here, and had it fail completely. So I think the marketing promise around being able to summarize your folders, or even find images of various kinds in your photo album, using an AI approach, it's good positioning, and it probably will be real one day, but maybe not fully baked yet.
Well, I think that it's a statement, I guess, about the engagement. So those 150 million people is probably their core engaged audience. I'm one of those people. I pay $20 a month to Google for Gemini, and I rarely use Gemini. I typically use it to summarize YouTube videos, which is just based on a Google sort of scanning the existing transcript and summarizing that transcript. It's not, they don't actually go in and listen to the video itself to generate the summary. It's just piggybacking off of the existing transcript. And my experience of Gemini is that it's a poor version of ChatGPT. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people who will say the benchmarks that the 2.5 model is hitting are just fabulous, and it's outpacing everybody else. But as a consumer and as a business user who has tried to use it side by side with ChatGPT and Grok and Claude, it fails. It's weaker.
That's been my experience as well. Even using it with spreadsheets or in a Google Doc, for example, and even testing out some of the capabilities of summarize this document and these kinds of things, which is really not a specific use case that I use in Google Docs. But when I just test it out just to see, it feels inferior.
But what Google understands is that distribution is everything. That's why Beta didn't win the VCR war, the recording war, because VCR had a much better distribution. Distribution is so critical. VHS. Thank you. That distribution is so critical, and Google has that today. And they don't even they don't have to have a great product for a while for them to, be very, very, very important in the game, because they have the distribution.
Yes, that's all true. The two things about Gemini that are good, or the Gemini universe that are good, is Notebook LM, which has limited utility, but it's still useful, and Deep Research, which is okay. But in terms of the distribution, you're absolutely right, Neil. But Google has been determined by two courts to be an illegal monopoly. And one of the courts, the DC Circuit Court, which is doing the remedies trial that I alluded to, I think, or I talked about in our pre-show discussion, is trying to figure out now what to do about Google's monopoly. And one of the things that the Justice Department is concerned about is Google using its search monopoly and other and Android and Chrome to create a monopoly in AI, or to dominate AI by leveraging these existing distribution mechanisms, which are, either have been determined to be illegal from a concentration of power and abuse of power, market power standpoint, or kind of borderline. So we'll see if the government tries to do anything. If the court decides to do anything around AI, because that's one of the issues before the court.
Changing gears, and going on the idea of distribution, because Neil, you're absolutely right with that. There's a research paper that came out by a company called Ramp AI. It's an index that reveals that over a third of U.S. businesses are now paying for AI tools, with OpenAI leading the adoption, followed by Anthropic. And then interestingly for me, Manus AI is in the lead with they're in the pack, let's say. The surge in enterprise AI spending is driven by the decreasing costs of AI services and the widespread integration of AI across various sectors, including finance, manufacturing, and technology. So it's B2B kind of a focus, but it really shows that, some of these other large language models, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Manus, are really gaining adoption in the market.
What they do is they do accounting related and expense management related stuff, and they have credit cards. So this is all credit card data running through their system, and they're extrapolating from their client base.
And their sample is over 30,000 American businesses.
10,000 are paying for something. Is that what they're saying?
No, 40% of their credit card users are paying for an AI subscription, is how I read that.
Yeah. Where's Perplexity in there, by the way? Do they show up on the list?
It's not in there at all in the top 5 or top whatever it is.
I've been wondering about them, just given the way that AI is now being so deeply integrated, especially into Google.
They're raising more money. I think they're raising additional $500 million at some multi-billion-dollar valuation. So they're not on the way out. I mean, they're going to have to figure out how to differentiate, because on the one hand, you got Google, on the other hand, you got ChatGPT, and now Claude, which is, preferred by a lot of people. So it's pretty competitive, pretty hard.
And like we were talking about last week, Apple is somewhere in the, shopping the aisles here to figure out who's going to be whether they go that route, whether they look to acquire a company, or whether they look to leverage an open source model, which could, I've been reading a lot about how open source models really will supersede any of these closed models.
There was an article, I don't know where it appeared originally, about how AT&T was initially using ChatGPT, I think for customer service or for maybe multiple purposes internally. It was just costing them too much money. They liked its performance, but they shifted, I think, to the Llama, the Facebook open source model, and they said it saved them tons and tons of money. Yeah, it's open source, so they're not. I guess there's no licensing at all. There's no payment at all. They just have to manage it on their end. So
which isn't free, managing it on their end.
Well, but I mean, it's very different than paying
A
by
subscription
on a
model.
on a usage basis. And so I think that you're right, Andy, that it's going to be more prevalent. And these open source models will be almost as good or as good as the proprietary models. And OpenAI said they were going to release an open source model. I don't know how that will work exactly. So, but one quick point about the ramp data, which we can include in the show notes, which is interesting. So 40% adoption overall, then OpenAI is 32% of that. So the overwhelming majority. Then Anthropic at 8%, and then you've got the ankle biters, including Gemini. And what they show here is a decline in Gemini adoption. It's going. There was a drop of a fairly significant amount given its market share on the ramp platform, at least. So that's pretty interesting, given what we're saying about the Google One Premium subscription growth.
So this thing says $3 billion is being spent, right?
No, that's my calculation of Google. My calculation of the 150 million Google One users that are paying $20 a month.
Does Ramp have a number? Because I saw a number that 230 billion is being spent on AI.
No, there is no dollar. There is no dollar number
they
that they have.
They don't do a calculation of what that would be.
Well, you could back into it, right?
Yeah,
you could back into it. But
I just was wondering if it was in there.
No, they do not have a public number that they have identified.
What I did find interesting is that Manus AI was one of the mentioned in there, and those guys just came on the block recently. But their approach to the whole AI space is all around agentic AI and building agents that go do things for you, or sequences of actions that you start with the goal in mind, and then it figures out how to accomplish that goal. That's a significant shift.
And by the way, just on that note, because I think this is so fascinating, it works exactly the way that we described, I think even a few months ago. This is basically AI that creates a checklist for itself, and goes through that checklist and executes each of the items in order. And you know, when you sort of look under the hood as these tools are doing their thing, you can actually see the checklist itself. It's a simple text file with little X marks next to the ones that have been completed, and that's literally what's going on under the hood as these agents are going about their business. So it's totally wild. It's essentially this nesting function that makes you know, agents possible.
Yeah, and the prompt is a little bit of a different prompt, right? Because you really have to start with, here's your goal, and let me tell you what I actually need in order for you to meet your goal. Right. And you have to unpack it in order for it to be super useful.
Yeah, there's sort of like an acceptance criteria element. So very similar to what you would do if you're creating a software product, where you describe what it is you want the thing to do, and then you have to describe as clearly as you can what would indicate that it's done. Like, you know, what is a measurement?
What does success look like?
Yeah, what does success look like?
Yeah. Which is interesting. As we're talking about this, I saw a video of somebody asking Sam Altman, and I think it was a Sequoia panel that he was on. And they're asking him how younger people are using ChatGPT versus older people. And what he was saying was that older people are using it more of like a search engine replacement. They'll ask a pretty basic question, get a response, whereas younger people are using it more like an operating system, meaning they're asking it life questions and a lot of lifetime questions of what should I ask a coach? Exactly. A lot of the stuff that we've been talking about on the podcast.
Where those two different segments are in their life, in their lives, you know.
I guess this makes me young. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Thank goodness.
That's right.
It makes me old.
Well, it's remarkable how quickly and how many people have adopted this sort of coach relationship or therapist relationship or companion or confidant relationship with AI. And I think, you know, maybe for another time, there are just a lot of privacy implications that nobody is thinking through carefully.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, I know. If we thought it was bad that Facebook had access to all of this stuff, like, how about when I divulge my deepest, darkest secrets to an AI? What is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't that could lead us into the discussion about ads and these things? Because
it could.
That stuff, they're going to be really well personalized ads coming back at you.
Yeah,
right.
Disturbingly, distressingly well personalized ads.
Well, I mean, the problem with personalization has never been that it's valuable or not valuable. I mean, people abstractly recognize personalization as really a valuable thing. The problem is the creep factor. Who's doing what with my data behind the scenes? What are they doing with my data? In the United States, until very, very recently, you sort of didn't have to worry about being spied on or being I mean, you know, paranoid people would disagree with that statement, but what you've got now in the government, without getting too political, is that they're unifying all the government databases, which previously were separate and had all these privacy safeguards around them, and they're doing that for immigration enforcement. So they're taking IRS data and Social Security data and other data sources, and they're trying to knit them into a single database where they can identify specific individuals for law enforcement, in this case immigration. But that's the first step, right? So this puts us on the path to becoming China and becoming a true surveillance state. So in that larger context, you know, think about all the law enforcement that go immediately to Apple and Google, like, hey, we've got this crime, we want your location data to track, you know, to put the perpetrator at the scene. and Google and Apple have resisted that. And then as it turns out, law enforcement could just go in and buy the data from third parties, third party vendors in the market. But this is the risk for people, is that we will be profiled and targeted and put on watch lists and discriminated against, and the data will be used and abused by healthcare companies that will deny coverage, and insurance carriers. And that's the real risk.
What about the usefulness of the ads, Greg? I mean, come on.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Greg.
putting that aside, yes.
Why did you go to the dark side so fast, Greg? Are you paranoid?
Yeah. Well,
you're absolutely right. I mean, that is for sure part of this, and that is the double-edged sword, and that's a lot of what is not, being being put front and center. It's a little surprising to me when you have, a guy like Sam Altman, for example, who really understands the benefits of Apple leading with their privacy whole campaign and what they do around privacy.
Why is ChatGPT not doing the same thing?
Yeah, if they know that is such an important part of a customer's relationship with Apple, why wouldn't they lead with that? And maybe it's just a missed opportunity.
It is a missed opportunity.
It seems to me that in this world of AI, that the companies that lead with privacy in this environment will be the ones that will get more adoption, even if it's better technology. It's an opportunity.
It's a differentiator. It's a differentiator for sure.
You really believe the majority of this country cares about their privacy in the way that you guys are talking about it? You really believe that?
Yes, but they don't think about it. They don't think about it. They don't think about it. They don't understand the implications of all the technology.
Well, that's my point, Greg.
There's a difference between understand and care. If you make people understand, they will care, but they don't understand, so there's no evidence of them. I mean, I could pull together a lot of data that shows that people are creeped out by personalization, and their willingness to give information to third parties for personalization in exchange is limited to certain kinds of things. If they had total confidence that their data were going to be private and they were the ones that were going to benefit from the personalization, and some creepy third party or big brother wasn't going to get.
When they're asked about it, of course they want their stuff private. Of course I do. But in practice, people give their information everywhere today. I mean, we just said it.
Who's using Snapchat?
So what is the point that you're making, Neil?
My point is that privacy and concept is something we all appreciate and understand and want for ourselves. But in practice, we give away everything we have about ourselves
because it's just like the click wrap.
Facebook.
It's just like the click wrap agreements that we have to sign in order to get access to stuff. Download the latest operating system. Do you agree? Yes. We have no practical way as individuals to protect our privacy except for binary use, don't use, which is socially not tenable. That's why we should have laws that protect privacy and punish companies that abuse it. And we do to varying degrees at the state level, not at the federal level. Now, I'll make one more point and then we should probably move on. Yes, people would love personalized ads. All the stuff that ChatGPT and others are capturing would make for much better ads, much better ad experience than what exists today. But think about all the cases where people used somebody's search history to convict somebody, because they just went to Google and they got their search history with a subpoena or a warrant or whatever. And, the person said, how do I poison my wife, or whatever. And that was used as part of the evidence to convict that person. This will be so much worse. Yeah. I mean, provided that people want to chase it down, and ChatGPT or Google are not going to be able to resist these warrants. I mean, in the UK, they wanted Apple to build a backdoor for all iPhones and so that they could access any iPhone, get any data off of any iPhone, and they didn't do it.
You know, I think what may happen, because all the hand-wringing and discussion in the world about security and privacy and the importance of it doesn't seem to motivate consumer behavior, but it is likely that there will be an enormous and sort of terrifying privacy overreach that causes something really big and bad to happen, that will be a catalyzing event for driving people towards, sort of even a knee-jerk drive towards platforms that have more privacy. Like that's happened a little bit with, even around the messaging platforms. Like there's a reason that some of these messaging platforms that have end-to-end encryption, frankly, around I think it was around the Edward Snowden days, that there was actually a big wave of people moving off of the platforms that didn't have end-to-end encryption onto like WhatsApp and Telegram and Signal, because they did. And so even if you're not a whistleblower, in the NSA, that news, sort of circulating drove some changes in consumer behavior. So I kind of wonder if that's what's going to happen, that there isn't like a security or privacy D-Day coming in the next couple of years that changes consumers, and then whoever's got that platform is the beneficiary of all that movement.
For 15 minutes, and then people become numb to it. I mean, think about all the data breaches. Think about all the data breaches that are just happening all the time, everywhere around you. Netflix data breach, your bank data breach, your healthcare system.
Those are data breaches without consequence. You know what I mean? So like what I'm thinking of.
No, your data's all on the dark web, quote unquote.
Yeah, but has that impacted you or me? Like, I mean,
I've gotten a couple of blackmail kind of notes from people.
You got blackmail notes. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just generic. It's generic stuff. It's like, I mean, I won't go into it, but anyway, it's just generic stuff that isn't directed at me.
Is it Nigerian prince promising riches or something else?
Yeah, I ignore it. But it's not happening all the time. But it's anyway.
We'll see. I don't disagree. I mean, we have a very short memory in this country around problems, and I think that's equally plausible. I don't want to jinx myself, but I've always said that I don't care as much about privacy, because if somebody really wants to know about me, like, that's exciting. That's wonderful. But I don't know that I'd feel that way if it was actually being leveraged against me.
Well, let's move on to the notes from the field, because I think it's a little bit more compelling. Before the show started here, John, you were talking about a thought experiment. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, and we can
yeah. I mean, sure. I'll just pose a simple question. Maybe this is something for listeners to weigh in on as well. So the idea is if you go back to Web 1.0, and this is the truth, a reality around most technology revolutions, it was the people that assumed that internet bandwidth would go to infinite and to zero cost, infinite and free, that ultimately won. And a really good example of that is, in the early, let's even call it dial-up days, anybody who was trying to do internet video was laughed at, because it just wasn't fast enough to do videos. You might spend 3 hours downloading a 20-second video. So kind of what's the point of a video platform? Well, the people who had enough foresight to say, you know what, bandwidth is going to be better by orders of magnitude, and the costs are going to be lower by orders of magnitude, went on to create services like YouTube. We have a similar moment evolving right now, where a lot of people are saying, AI is not fast enough, good enough, cheap enough to do that thing. And so the thought experiment is like, what is the equivalent of the YouTube in AI, meaning the thing that people are overlooking or dismissing because it's just not fast enough, cheap enough, whatever, that is going to change everything. And of course, if we knew the answer to that, we'd probably be billionaires in the next couple of years, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think about it.
All right, so I've been thinking a little bit about this, and one of the things I've been thinking about is this idea of chatting with any website that you're on and having it be conversational. So it could be a news story. It could be something that you're interested in. You're just like doing some research. Maybe it's a travel website that you're going to. And in that moment, you want to chat with it. You want to have a conversation, and the ability to not only have that conversation, but for it to produce video information that's relevant to your questions, for it to produce any kind of other supplementary content that helps tell that story and answer whatever it is that you're interested in at the moment. And now you sort of have these like signals that are happening in the market with generative video or agentic AI or these kinds of things that are happening. If you extrapolate that out, the general idea is get what you want when you want it, right? And if you're curious about something, search is obviously the place for that. But if you're just like not in Google, or if you're not doing a search in the moment, and you're just like out on a website, or you're doing something in that moment, and you want to have a conversation about that thing that you're looking into, maybe it's even like, you're doing something arcane, like I'm looking to repair something. And like, for example, I were displaced from the fire, so I'm now in a new house. And one of the things I've been doing is taking pictures of some of the equipment around the house, going like, how do I use this? And I'll take a picture of it and I'll upload it to ChatGPT. It'll give me a guide of like how to use this thing. It's that kind of a thing to me that feels like that's going to happen here, where these tools can now create that information on demand.
I like that.
I don't want to editorialize too much on that, but I agree that just the conversational interface that chat represents makes it a lot easier to deal with, get certain kinds of questions answered, versus sort of going through, the old process of searching Google, then going to a website, then going through a website, searching on the website or browsing through the website and trying to get your question answered.
Seems kind of dial-up.
Yeah, it's very inefficient. It's very inefficient. Yeah. And so everything is going to shift into this user experience that you're describing.
Yeah. Feels like it. And it feels like in an agentic kind of world, you can just flip from idea to idea and send an agent down the path to do that. So it feels like maybe like a control panel of, a bunch of these different agents that are your assistants for these ideas that you have. And then maybe even, not only to give you an answer in that moment, but then also to remind you of something later. And hey, remember when you were talking about that? Here's something else that's in your feed that's relevant.
A true personal assistant, right? A true digital personal assistant.
Proactive aspect of it.
Like, I took a picture of a plant that has yellow leaves. I put it into ChatGPT. It told me what's going on, what the remedy is. Then I walked away from it. It'll tell me, though, it'll remind me, hey, your plant out there needs some organic material to change what's going on in the soil, and it'll remind me that I did that. I mean, it's going to do all sorts of stuff like that.
And how about if it reminds you next time you go to Home Depot and you're like, hey, Neil, don't forget, remember that thing we talked about?
Right. That's location awareness, right? So it knows that that would have to,
it ties the picture of the plant to the location and knows that, I can buy that at Home Depot.
Right. It would need to
have a cover for my grill that's messed up.
It would need to know that it would need to have an underlying database that would allow it to know all this location information. And then when you got close enough to Home Depot, it could say, oh, Neil's at Home Depot. Now I'm going to call up all the Home Depot stuff. And then it would provide you with a list of reminders. Yes, it would be very useful. That's a form of personalization, obviously.
But I go back to your question, John, about, or your statement. I mean, are we not imagining that it's going to do all these things? I mean, whereas you made the point that, people who thought about YouTube well in advance of the capacity or the lack of constraints on that. What are we thinking about today that we see being constrained? I see no constraints. I mean,
there are that experience that we just described doesn't exist. So there will be these killer apps that happen along the way that are the combination of, some of these fragmented capabilities that exist.
Like everything
matter of time.
Everything gets smarter and easier in theory. If the agents and if the foundational models become more accurate and more trustworthy, then you do a lot more things with them. And then the agents, if they can execute and are trustworthy, you will allow them to do a lot of things that you would have done manually, going to websites, making certain kinds of transactions.
Yeah, I think more broadly, like that, that this is it is a question of timing. I mean, even in the early dial-up internet days, it was conceivable that there would be much faster bandwidth eventually. But anything that's within the time window of say 5 to 7 years is in the purview of VCs and investors and people putting money into new things. Anything from 7 or 10 years on is the purview of science fiction. It's like, it's feasible, it makes sense, this might happen, but we really don't know. And there's a lot of things, for instance, that have been 10 years away for 50 years. You know what I mean?
Well, like artificial general intelligence is one of them.
AGI is a good example of that, So I think that, to your point, there's a lot of things we can imagine and see coming, but the question is, like, are people building around them today into the expectation that they will actually be possible within the next 5 to 7 years?
We see the incremental improvements or the faster, better version of something that already exists. We don't see the thing that doesn't exist at all. Like this, I don't know if self-driving cars qualifies in this category, but that's probably something that was imaginable from a science fiction standpoint, decades and decades ago. Yeah. Or a lot of the sort of interface. I mean, a lot of the devices that we just take for granted, the natural language and voice capabilities, all of that stuff was envisioned. There's the whole Star Trek thing. Star Trek imagined all these devices that now exist. I don't know what the thing is that, you've got Elon Musk out there talking about Neuralink and brain implants and all of that. I don't know what the thing is that doesn't exist that is kind of a right brain thing that nobody has thought of.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know that it's so much nobody has thought of, because I think even people who conceived of video streaming before YouTube, it's sort of more, where people are making their bets. Like, is it reasonable to build a YouTube in whatever that was, 1997 or 9 or whenever when did they build that? Probably in that era somewhere. Yeah, I have.
$40 billion business today.
Right. So like, so it's more that kind of thing. I actually think I'm wondering about sort of bespoke entertainment. We've talked a little bit about that, but like, what about the the rock song made just for me, and not in this sort of like funny Suno way, but or the movie made just for me, immersive one-to-one movie, or entertainment, even VR related stuff. Like I think there's some things that are going to play out there that are impossible right now because of the compute required, that probably won't be impossible in the next 5 years, and that could be completely game changing from an entertainment, gaming, movie perspective.
You're probably right about that. I mean, the idea of putting people through VR in a physical place, like some VR technology allows me to sit in the sphere virtually and have an experience with the headset on that was almost like I was there. That kind of stuff.
And that's going to be the sort of fidelity on the hardware side, but then add to that the AI element, which would be interacting with human-like avatars that are indistinguishable from humans, and where you have this, the reason that people are going to coaches in ChatGPT is because it's a human experience. So now embody that with VR and let me interact with my coach or with whoever in an environment that's almost indistinguishable from reality. Like, that's pretty wild. And by the way, as always, I think the adult industry will get there first, adult entertainment, and probably lead the way. But I don't think that we'll be far behind that, the rest of us. And me sitting across the table from a coach that looks indistinguishable from a human, having those ChatGPT conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine sort of, choose your own adventure style.
Absolutely.
experiences where you go into an environment, you go into a video game essentially that has certain kinds of stories that you can play out, and there are avatars that are very human-like, and you can interact with them, and they have a certain amount
Absolutely.
of spontaneity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Open
that
world
kind
video.
that kind of thing could essentially replace contemporary filmmaking. You know, if it
Yeah, it would actually be the merger of contemporary filmmaking and open world video games. Like if you sort of bring those two things together, and now it's also in a one-to-one, meaning it's my world designed and developed specifically for me with story arcs that resonate with me. Like that's pretty wild.
except that there be a certain number of people who want to interact in an environment with both you know, AI characters and other humans, the
And try
multiplayer
to tell the
game.
difference. You know what?
Right.
When we get there, I'll invite you guys to my world. You can see just how.
But there's a whole health aspect to this as well. I mean, we're talking about entertainment in that quadrant. The health quadrant side of this is potentially profound. And, you know, I mean, there are new technologies where you can now hold your phone up to the camera up to your face, and it can tell you your blood pressure and like a number of other things about you just from an image that is like really groundbreaking kind of stuff. And when you combine that with a health coach and provide you with all kinds of assistance, and then you got to, you know, an Instacart that can go get you, you know, the food that's going to be healthy for you, and, you know, drive.
Sounds horrible to me. Sounds like a horrible way to live.
Well, you know, I mean, you can steer it however you want to steer it, right? It's up to you. But you know, a lot of these advancements that are coming out with you know, in the world of genetics as well, like David Sinclair and his whole longevity, you know, kind of track of what's happening there. You know, it's going to be pretty amazing of what you can do to direct your health in a way that you're currently not doing it.
Did you see that baby was cured of some disease through some
Genetic.
genetics?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, maybe cancer will be actually cured.
But you won't have to worry about cancer when your brain is disembodied and put in a jar, and you live in the AI virtual reality world where everything is
Which,
where
as far
everything
as
is
I can
perfect.
tell, may have already happened. That's
the Matrix. That's the
Yeah.
Matrix. That's
Yeah.
the Matrix.
That's the dream.
All right.
All right.
We
On
got
that
close
note,
now.
we'll wrap it up today. But thanks everybody for listening. Great conversation. This is fun stuff, and it's fun to explore what's coming next. So, John, thank you for that.
Awesome.
All right, guys.
All right.
We'll talk to you next
Bye,
week.
everybody.
See you next time. Bye bye.